got it. Says yes. I just heard the lady say, but I don't have to hear it. Is this turned on? Or, yes. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Nama. Oh, Krishna Prasthaya. Dale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Uti Namane
Vishnu Padaya
Krishna Prasthaya Dale Srimati
Bhakti Vedanta Swami
Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachare Shatarine
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivastava Gaur Bhaktivinoda
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare
Hare,
Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama.
Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram,
Hare
Hare
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare
Hare,
Rama,
Hare
Hare Ram,
Rama,
Hare Ram,
Rama
Ram
Rama,
Ram,
Hare Hare.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Hare.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare
Hare.
Krishna, Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Hare
Rama
Ram, Ram
Hare
Hare
Ram,
Hare.
Hare
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hare, Hare Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare Ram, Hare
Hare
Ram, Ram Hare
Krishna,
Hare.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare
Hare
Rama,
Krishna,
Ram Rama, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare Rama,
Jai Prabhu,
Jaya Prabhupada,
Jai Jai Prabhupada,
Jaya
Prabhupada, Jai
Prabhupada,
Jaya
Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya
Jai
Prabhupada,
Jai Jai
Prabhupada,
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 Jai
Prabhupada,
Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
jai. I forgot this old trick. The best cord for cartels are shoelaces. I forgot that. These are shoelaces, right? No? Oh, they look. Okay.
Not up for the kids.
Well, they look just like seeker laces. There you go. Hari Bol. All right. How do I get rid of this side screen? How do I do this without leaving? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, got it. Hare Krishna Prabhus. Welcome
Hare
back
Krishna.
to
Hare
the
Krishna.
Acharya Essentials series. This was the silver lining in the pandemic for me, that I discovered a better way to present the Founder Acharya online by having less content, but only selecting the most essential content and more poignant slides and more stopping for Q&A. So yesterday's lesson, who remembers the title of yesterday's lesson?
To find a guru.
The spiritual
First
master.
lesson to me. what we call the Sambandha section of the seminar series. The spiritual masters. Yes, plural. So the second lesson of the whole series is called the Founder Acharya Principle. Although the English Sanskrit compound Founder Acharya, that phrase, Founder Acharya, is less than a century old, its seeds in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition date from the time immediately following Lord Chaitanya's departure from this world. Who remembers the date of the departure? The year. Mahaprabhu. 1534 AD, or CE, they say these days, common era. In this lesson, we'll look at 4 of those seeds. So although the phrase is recent, it's within the last 120 years, the seeds of the phrase, of the concept, the principle of Founder Acharya, they go back to Lord Chaitanya's time. In this lesson, we'll look at 4 of those seeds, as well as the great Gaudiya Acharyas who sowed them. All right, slide 2. Good. An organizational seed. So the first seed I call an organizational seed. Can you think of that phrase, Founder Acharya? It's got an organizational component. Anybody who starts anything is the founder. And it's got a spiritual component, Acharya. Circa, who knows what circa means? Yeah, it's Latin for around. Circa 1545, Lord Chaitanya's chief disciples, there they are, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, founded the Vishva Vaishnav Raj Sabha, which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta later identified as the gathering, this is how he translated that phrase, Vishva Vaishnav Raj Sabha, as the gathering or congregation of devotees who worship, quote, the king of all Vaishnavas in the world, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's Lord Chaitanya's Krishna in the mood of a Vaishnava devotee. As the Sabha's most prolific writer and philosopher, Srila Jiva Goswami also emerged as the group's most skillful organizer. So that's supposed to be Jiva down in the end, our right. Because he was younger. He was from, he's the son of Anuruddha. Yeah. Right. So, for example, Jiva Goswami founded Vrindavan's famous, what temple did he found in Vrindavan? Radha Damodar temple, where he established a library of all the Goswamis' works. He was the first to realize, hey, this is amazing. Sacred writings we're all producing here. We need to preserve this. And didn't mean going to Kinko copy or how did they copy in those days? They had it by hand. So it's very laborious.
Palm leaves.
Palm leaf, different tree bark. Yeah. I just heard that I was just listening to, because I was hearing a podcast with the Bhaktivedanta Research Center in Calcutta, how they're preserving all these works now. They're trying to, before they all disintegrate from the palm leaves. And they were talking about the ink. Yeah, I forget exactly.
They made their
Yeah, they made their own ink, but I'm trying to think how they did that. Hare Krishna. Welcome.
That's why it's called Indian ink.
India. Okay.
It's actually called Indian ink.
Uh-huh.
So,
Not to be confused with the corporate INC, INK. India Ink. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of them. Okay. So Sri Jiva had those works copied and then dispatched his 3 best students. So Jiva Goswami had 3 star pupils. Anybody remember who his pupils were? Right. Right. Srinivas, Narottam, and Shyamananda. He sent them, he dispatched them to Bengal on the first Gaudiya Vaishnava book distribution party, the whole drama of how the books were in the trunk and then they were stolen. And but that's the story of what happened to that party, how the books were stolen by a king's thieves, how they were recovered, and how the king and his accomplices later surrendered to Krishna through Srinivas. He became the biggest preacher there on the party. Foreshadowed dramas Lord Chaitanya continues to enact through ISKCON and other Gaudiya groups today. Suffice it to say that the Goswamis Sabha, there they are, they're the founders, dedicated to articulating, preserving, and distributing the Lord's teachings, planted the founder Acharya principles organizational seed. So that's the first seed. So Mahaprabhu disappeared in 1534, and then within, say, 10, 11 years, in 1545, is that what I said? Yeah. Jiva especially, they organized, they had an organization, Sri Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha. They started teaching Lord Chaitanya's philosophy to whoever would, first among themselves, they were sharing, and then they were opening it up and promulgating the philosophy. So that's the first seed. Any questions so far about that? And on the chat, remember folks on the chat, you can write in your questions or comments. Okay. So slide 3. Okay. This is a philosophical seed. First was the organizational seed, and now we have a philosophical seed. Around 1552, so that's 7 years after they founded their Sangha, just a few years after the Sabha's founding, Srila Rupa Goswami finished his landmark work. So what was his most famous book? Anybody know? Well, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Prabhupada translated it later.
What is it?
Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, quote, the ocean of the pure nectar of devotional service. Yeah. In his commentary to the Sri Chaitanya Chaitamrita Adi Leela, chapter 5, text 203, Prabhupada writes, quote, Srila Rupa Goswami is described as the Bhakti Rasacharya, or one who knows the essence of devotional service. His famous book, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is the science of devotional service. And by reading this book, one can understand the meaning of devotional service. Yeah. So it was extraordinary because Rupa Goswami, he was just one of the 6 Goswamis. He wasn't the eldest. Who was the oldest? Sanatan. He wasn't famous for being the most renounced. Who was that? Raghunath Das. He wasn't the most prolific. Who wrote the most? Jiva. 4 times the Mahabharata worth of verses. Whoa. But as soon as he published Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, everybody went, whoa. Okay, you're the chief. He was the Bhakti Rasacharya, because he was the most expert at relishing the moods of devotional service to Krishna. So essential for devotees did Prabhupada consider Sri Rupa's masterwork that for more than 6 months in 1969, Prabhupada suspended his Bhagavatam writing to produce a summary study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu called The Nectar of Devotion. Yeah, Prabhupada actually stopped. He did that, and then he did Krishna book right after that. And this was very significant because Prabhupada was always in the mood of, I don't know how much longer I have to live. But he stopped his translation work of Bhagavatam just to give these essential books because he was afraid he wouldn't get to the 10th canto, and he barely did. So he did give us the Krishna book, which was a summary study of the whole 10th canto. And he gave us Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Now, interestingly enough, when Prabhupada was initiated, by another reason he gave the book, he gave Nectar Devotion, was that aside from being what he told us was the law book for devotees, he said, this is our law book, how to practice devotional service authentically, legally. He was personally given an order by his Guru Maharaj at his initiation in Allahabad in 1933. Srila Saraswati Thakur said, you should study Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu very carefully, because he could see in the potential in this disciple, someone who could really, convey that message far and wide. And sure enough, Prabhupada did. Okay. In his introduction to Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada writes that, quote, in our mental activities, we should always try to think of Krishna and try to plan how to please him, following in the footsteps of the great Acharyas and the personal spiritual master. Listen to the distinction, you might have missed it. There's a distinction being made here between great Acharyas and one's personal spiritual master. And Prabhupada says this again later in the book. Later in the book, Prabhupada repeats the distinction between, quote, the great Acharyas and the personal spiritual master by the way he translates Sri Rupa's phrase, Sadhu Vartmanuvartanam, quote, following in the footsteps of great Acharyas, teachers, under the direction of the spiritual master. So remember in lesson 1, we learned that initiating and instructing spiritual masters are like parents and relatives, respectively. As a child may at first see his parents and relatives as everything, then matures to see them in perspective, so a disciple may initially see his spiritual parents and relatives as everything, then matures to appreciate them in relation to, quote, the great acharyas. Yeah. So right now, for example, Acarya, you're very young, and so it's well, you're pretty advanced though. Maybe you've already passed through the age. But there's a stage in our development, a natural stage in child development, where the child is so small and dependent on the parents that practically the parents are God, for the child, because that's the parents are supplying everything and they're teaching them everything, before they go to school. But if the parents are good parents, they'll keep teaching and they'll keep coaching and everything. But then they'll also introduce their child or children to people even greater than themselves. Okay, here's your teachers. We can teach you something, but these teachers are going to teach you more. And then they introduce them maybe to spiritual masters later on. So let's keep going with this. To help us understand this philosophical seed of the founder Acharya principle, we will now hear how the Acharya Sampradaya culture, the line of prominent Shiksha exemplars who make up our disciplic succession, inspired one famous disciple to beg his great guru to bring him closer to their foundational Acharya. So that the first seed, first seed was an organizational seed. We had the 6 Goswamis founding an organized Sangha. The second seed is a philosophical distinction between one's personal spiritual masters, Shiksha and Diksha gurus, and great acharyas, who are like super gurus, mega gurus, people might say these days. And then to help us understand that distinction, we're going to now hear about a famous, what do I put it here? To help us understand this philosophical seed of the founder Acharya principle, we will now hear how the Acharya Sampradaya culture, the line of prominent Shiksha exemplars who make up our disciplic succession, inspired one famous disciple to beg his great guru to bring him closer to their foundational Acharya. So that's a lot of words. Here's what it means. So the next slide, it's a cultural seed. So before the Gaudiya saint Srila Narottam Das Thakur was born, that's supposed to be the depiction of him on the left. Lord Chaitanya told Lokanath Goswami, so Lord Chaitanya, that's supposed to be him on the right, and in the middle is Lokanath. Well, I'm just using that picture. It's actually Rupa, but if you know the pastime. But I'm turning him into Lokanath because I couldn't find any better pictures. So yeah, before Narottam was even born, Lord Chaitanya told Lokanath Goswami, quote, "Within a short time, a prince named Narottam will become your disciple. He will be a gifted devotee, full of love and devotion, and empowered to save the fallen conditioned souls from hellish life. His enchanting, beautiful kirtan will melt even wood or stone." So this is even before Narottam was born. Lord Chaitanya appeared to Lokanath in a dream and told him all this. And dreams are tricky. We don't usually pay them much mind unless they're consistent with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And of course, dreams that liberated souls like Lokanath have, they're as good as Shastra practically. Now that quote was from the Narottam Vilas. So after the Lord left this world, however, Sri Lokanath was so distraught, he was so upset that Lord Chaitanya had disappeared, that he withdrew from everyone and vowed never to accept disciples. Later in Vrindavan, when Sri Jiva noticed that Narottam was drawn to the saintly Lokanath, remember Jiva was the teacher, and Narottam and Srinivas and Shamananda were his prize pupils. But Jiva noticed that Narottam was attracted to Lokanath. So when Jiva noticed that Narottam was drawn to the saintly Lokanath, Sri Jiva told Narottam to approach Lokanath for initiation. But everybody knew that Lokanath he'd made a vow. I'm not going to initiate. I'm going to withdraw from the world. He was just disturbed. So too disturbed for that kind of service. But as ardently as Narottam approached Lokanath, just as adamantly Lokanath refused. Nope, sorry, go somewhere else. Resolved nonetheless, Narottam, the son of a king, he was a prince, vowed to become Lokanath's menial servant and took to cleansing the area where the saint performed his early morning ablutions. So Narottam was thinking in his mind, okay, Guru Maharaj has rejected me, but I come with a lot of, I'm just putting it in our language now, I come with a lot of baggage. He was of royalty. So he knew with that kind of a birth, there comes a lot of false pride. It's easy to get proud of your riches and your opulence, and maybe you have good looks or good learning, whatever you have. So I'm going to do something that will knock down this false pride. So I'm going to become his cleanser around the area where he evacuates and bathes every day. That was quite a rut. Lokanath was so absorbed in his solitary meditations that even though he noticed someone was cleansing his ablution area, he paid it little mind. And we say ablution area, it's not like in the West where we have these nice spanking bathrooms. They were going in the field, right? And then bathing by a river, and so it was rough. He paid it little mind. But one day, after an entire year had passed, Lokanath decided to find out who was so conscientiously cleaning up after him. Yeah, he thought, well, I'm supposed to be a renunciate, and I'm taking service from somebody every day, and this is not right. I gotta stop this. So Narottam knew Lokanath's habit, what time he would come to the place to evacuate and bathe. So one morning, Lokanath showed up super early before Narottam even came. The next morning, he came earlier than usual and hid behind a tree. When Narottam approached, Lokanath saw who it was. Narottam, it's you! So Narottam has been found out. His identity exposed, Narottam fell at the saint's feet and begged to be accepted as his disciple. Lokanath refused at first, just like he did before, then later relented, remembering Mahaprabhu's prediction and conquered by the pure devotion of saintly Narottam. Narottam's mood was kind of like some hundreds of years later when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said to Gaur Kishore, "Oh, okay, if you don't accept me, I might as well throw myself off this bridge. My life has no meaning." So Lokanath saw that this person is so, he was conquered by Narottam's sincerity, and he remembered Mahaprabhu's, okay, you make one exception. This is the person you have to initiate. And conquered by the pure devotion of saintly Narottam. Now, here's the point, because this is a cultural seed. Although Srila Narottam Das Thakur became the only initiated disciple of Lokanath, Srila Lokanath Goswami, in Song 17, verse 4 of Narottam's famous song collection, Prarthana, he longs for Lokanath to bring him to their ultimate shelter in the disciplic succession, Srila Rupa Goswami. So, Prarthana, we sing every day. We sing Sri Guru Charana Padma in our temples. In Mayapur, they sing Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, that's from Prarthana. And then when someone disappears, we sing Ye Anilo Premadanna, that's from Prarthana. These are all the Narottam songs. So in Song 17 of the collection, they didn't usually name the songs. They just numbered them. Okay, this is an extraordinary song, because this is a song that Narottam wrote to Sri Rupa, but it's about wrote to Lokanath Goswami, but it's about Rupa Goswami. They're the main person in the line. Rupa Goswami, he was the Bhakti Rasacharya. They didn't say founder Acharya because English wasn't even in India in those days, thank God. Yet he was the Bhakti Rasacharya. So here's how the line goes from that song. Prabhu Lokanatha Kabe Samgelanya Jabe Shri Rupera Padapadme More Samarpibe. And that means, quote, when will my Lord and Master, Lokanath Goswami, my Lord and Master, Prabhu Lokanath, my Guru, when will he take me with him and place me at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami? So he's begging his Diksha Guru to take him closer to the founder Acharya, to the Bhakti Rasacharya. As, quote, the chief of the 6 Goswamis, Srila Rupa Goswami was Narottam and Lokanath's Bhakti Rasacharya, the master most expert at relishing the moods of pure devotional service to Lord Krishna. And as Narottam's Diksha Guru, initiating spiritual master, Sri Lokanath had the pleasure and privilege of bringing his disciple closer to the foundational leader of the 6 Goswamis Sabha. So similarly, the analogy is today, as I said yesterday, if we're serving in the capacity of Diksha or Shiksha Gurus, what's one of our main roles is to bring our disciples, our followers, to Prabhupada, to enhance and deepen their relationship with Srila Prabhupada. That's the measure of a bona fide spiritual master in ISKCON. So Lokanath too, he was very happily accepting this song, the sentiments in this song, and that's what he was doing. Quote, Rasacharya may sound close to, quote, founder Acharya, but by Lord Chaitanya's inscrutable will, the organizational, philosophical, and now cultural seeds sown early, quote, for founder Acharya, would have to wait another 3 centuries within a crucible, a pressure cooker, a crucible of disgrace before finishing seeds arrived to conclusively establish the founder Acharya principle. Yeah, within 100 years of Mahaprabhu disappearing, what happened to the Gaudiya Sampradaya? All these counterfeit, imposter branches of this sampradaya sprung up, and they ruined the reputation of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So many, Bhaktivinoda identified 13 of these sampradayas, and they disgraced the whole line. So,
What era was this? What year or what era?
well, it started, let's see, Mahaprabhu disappeared in 1534. So by the mid-17th century, by the mid-1600s, all these groups, Owls, Bowls, Saki Bekis, Gauranga Nagaris, Prakrita Sahajas, Siddha Pranali, all these people who were teaching, who were twisting the philosophy and the practices of bhakti into something, well, frankly, scandalous.
So,
Yeah.
can you,
Oh.
your
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So that prevailed for hundreds of years. You know, that disgrace, that bad name that bhakti got, especially Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But Lord, there was a method to the madness. Why, you might say, why did Lord Chaitanya do? Why did he let that happen? Well, because in the West, because Lord Chaitanya had been predicted in Chaitanya Bhagavat. Lord Chaitanya said, Pritiviti Achayata Nagaradi Brahm. And as many towns and villages as there are on the surface of the earth, my holy name will be preached. But that couldn't really happen efficiently until the technology was there to do that. So it wasn't for until a few hundred years later that the technology became available in terms of communication and transportation to take this all over the world. Prabhupada came at a perfect time in the sense that that was when international jet travel became more and more accessible to people. It wasn't just for rich people who were, on a cruise or something. So, and also communication. Yeah. So we'll get to talk more about that later. So, so Bhakti Vinod. So we're going to go to Bhakti Vinod now, because those seeds, the organizational, philosophical, and cultural, they just sort of lay dormant within that crucible of disgrace. And then 300 years later, okay, slide. Oop, there we go. Our super hero, Acharya. Literary seeds. In the late 19th century, the great Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharya Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur identified and exposed more than a dozen counterfeit Gaudiya Vaishnava groups, who, beginning just a century after Lord Chaitanya's departure, had effectively disgraced Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Not only did Srila Bhaktivinoda restore Mahaprabhu's original teachings, as well as the glories of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, he also conceived of a mission to propagate Krishna consciousness globally, thus helping to fulfill a 16th century spiritual prophecy. Here's the line again. Quote, in every town and village, the chanting of my name will be heard. That's from the Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. So when reports reached Srila Bhaktivinoda of a rising Western interest in Indian culture, and Sanskrit in particular, the Thakur sent a copy of his Sanskrit work, Sri Krishna Samhita, to the American transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson, famous, and we use Emerson and Thoreau's quotes on the back of the Gita. Yeah, they were the two most prominent Americans that took an early interest in the Gita. And they were just reading, British translations. They weren't conveying the spirit of bhakti as it is, but still enough of the cosmology and the philosophy came through that it just amazed them. When Emerson gratefully replied, so Bhaktivinoda, somehow he knew that Emerson was living in Boston and he was teaching at Cambridge, I believe. At Harvard in Cambridge. He sent him a book, Sri Krishna, in Sanskrit. So when Emerson gratefully replied by requesting books in English, somehow Bhaktivinoda thought that Emerson knew Sanskrit. So Emerson said, oh, thank you so much. Do you have anything in English? And Bhaktivinoda knew English. He knew English, Hindi, he knew Bengali, and Sanskrit. Yeah. Srila Bhaktivinoda penned, he wrote, Lord Chaitanya, his life and precepts, and sent copies to several Western intellectuals and universities. So that was the book that Prabhupada said Bhaktivinoda sent to McGill University in Canada. Yeah, he sent it to, when I was in Australia several years ago, presenting this, the president of the temple, Adi Purush, my godbrother, he said, I'm going to take you to a place where Bhaktivinoda sent another copy of Sri Chaitanya, his life and precepts. And it's the, what was it? I forget the name of it. It was in University of Canberra. Yeah, in Canberra, Australia. So I didn't even know. I thought it was just McGill in Montreal, but it was, he sent to England, he sent to.
You just have that copy.
Where?
Do they?
In McGill?
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's still there, because when Prabhupada first went to Montreal in '67, because he was having visa problems staying in the States, he went to Montreal. And so his Sanskrit editor, kind of trainee, Prajumna Prabhu, he went to McGill and he found a copy of the book. I think maybe he's Xeroxed it or something, or he photocopied. He got some to show Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, yes, I've heard that the Thakur sent his book here. But it was a Bengali work by the Thakur, published in 1900 as Harinam Chintamani, that contained the crowning literary seeds for the founder Acharya principle. So now we're going to see from, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wrote 100 books. I mean, my God. Either in Sanskrit or English or Bengali or Hindi. And, but it was in a book written in Bengali in 1900 called Harinam Chintamani, the touchstone of the holy name, which we now have in English. Right, there's a couple of translations, one by Sarva Bhavana Prabhu, who's a Bengali, German-educated Bengali, and then Banuswami also gave us. And they're both on the database, Bhakti on the database. And that's where I found, I guess I got a tip. Just look in the database, Suresh Roy, you can see this Harinam Chintamani. So in chapter 6, Srila Bhaktivinoda describes 3 kinds of, I call them super gurus, if you like, in a disciplic tradition. The first is the Sampradayera Adi Guru. So you know those, well, we'll see it. I'll show it to you in a visual coming up. The first is the Sampradayera Adi Guru. It's the Bengali. The primeval guru of the tradition, like in our Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, our primeval guru is Lord Brahma. They're our prehistorical teacher before recorded history. And that's called the Sampradayera Adi Guru. Directly enlightened by the Lord himself. Following the primeval guru are the Shiksha Guru Pratishtita, the greatly revered preceptors who keep the tradition's teachings intact over long spans of time. So Prabhupada refers to, he's always referring to the Purva Acharya, the previous Acharyas, who lived, long ago, but who kept it, the spirit of the teachings intact. But when the Thakur identified the third guru, he described him in the superlative. So according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this third guru in the line is the most important. And the translation of the Bengali is, quote, however, the Adyacharya, or original guru of a particular disciplic line, is appropriately worshipped and respected as the Guru Shiramani, the topmost crown jewel of the spiritual masters. His perfect philosophical conclusions are to be followed by all in his succession. Any contrary instructions will not be accepted. Full stop, close quote. Okay, the stage was set for the founder Acharya seeds to bear fruit. So you got so let's bring it down to our Sampradaya. So Lord Brahma, he's the Adi Guru, and the previous acharyas in the line are the Shiksha Gurus. And then in our particular branch of Lord Chaitanya's Gaudiya Sampradaya, Prabhupada founded ISKCON. So he's our, supreme instructor in our ISKCON branch of the Chaitanya tree. And the Thakur says, the Thakur calls him the Adyacharya, or it's like founder, Adi Acharya, or original guru of a disciplic line, is appropriately worshipped and respected as the Guru Shiromani, the topmost crown jewel of the spiritual masters. And if anybody teaches or says anything or writes anything that contradicts that guru's teachings, then we don't accept them. In other words, we see all teachers and teachings through Prabhupada's eyes, through his vision. And even if those teachings are legitimate, we're chaste to our founder Acharya, and that saves us from being like spiritual tourists, just sort of shop around. And because the danger is that if we just take a little bit from here and a little bit from there, that we never really stick to one thing and get purified. We just, it's like if you go to doctors and you can get different opinions. And finally you find a doctor who you like, because because that doctor's opinion sort of it jives with your likes and dislikes. But you need a doctor who can really cure you, help you, not just someone who's coddling you or pampering to your desires. Okay, so those are the four seeds that we've talked about: the organizational, philosophical, cultural, and finally literary. And now the stage was set for the founder Acharya's seeds to bear fruit, because the Thakur lived at into the 20th century, but he was born in 1838 to 1914. He lived for 75 years. So the seeds bear fruit. Anything in the chat yet? Okay. In the 1880s, while envisioning a worldwide Krishna consciousness movement, Srila Bhaktivinoda revived the Vaishnav Raj Sabha and launched a Bengali spiritual journal, Sajjana Toshini. This is a Bengali periodical for the satisfaction of the devotees. And not only did the Thakur single-handedly, expose the counterfeit versions of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, he reestablished the purity of Mahaprabhu's teachings, and then he wanted to start making good on the prediction that in every town and village, Krishna's name will be sung. So he envisioned a movement. Prabhupada said that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the pioneer of the Hare Krishna movement for the modern age. But he was getting older, and he saw that he didn't have time to really manifest it. So he prayed to the Lord. By then, the Thakur was the chief magistrate in Puri. And in those days, the chief magistrate of the district, the head legal person, was also the head of the temple, of the Puri temple. So he prayed to Lord Jagannath to send someone from his personal staff to help me take it to the next step, the next level. And sure enough, Bimal Prasad Dutt appeared famously in Puri. And after 6 months, the Rath Yatra happened. He appeared in February, and then the Rath Yatra came in July, and then the cart stopped outside of the chief magistrate's house on the Grand Trunk Highway. And then Bhagavati Devi, his mom, brought the baby out for the blessings of the deity. And then what happened? You know the story. What happened when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's Bimal Prasad's mother placed the feet at the feet of the deity, the baby? You know what happened? Yeah. All right, over his neck. And then, also earlier they noticed that when he came out of his mother's womb, the umbilical cord was wrapped like a Brahmin thread around his body. And those were, you could say cute signs, but even when the child was, by the time Bhima Prasad was 7 years old, he knew the whole Gita by heart, and furthermore, he could give class on it. he could speak on it by 7, right? So this was not an ordinary child. He was like a super intelligent person.
Oh, maybe you're gonna adjust your camera just a little bit.
Oh, yeah, thank you. All right, so
That was the period when Sant Tukaram was also there.
Tukaram was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is later. This is, almost 20th. Yeah. Right.
Because he was also at a very young age. He was teaching the Gita, I think, before his age.
Yeah, Madhva too. These super gurus, they manifest early symptoms of their greatness. Yeah. Okay. So in the 80s, Bhaktivinoda started this Sri Vishnu Sajjana Toshini, this journal. And let's see, 4 decades later, so then we're talking about the 1920s, after Bhaktivinoda had passed away in 1914, Srila Bhaktivinoda's illustrious son, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, reimagined the Sabha as the Gaudiya mission and transformed his father's journal into, what was the name of the English language? The Harmonist, yeah. An English language periodical with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's scholarly disciple, Professor Nishikant Sanyal, as his co-editor. Next slide. There it is. There's the Harmonists. And the first issue was in June 1927. It was just an annual then. Look, June 27 to May 28, it says. So, and why in English? Because that was becoming the rising star of languages. It was becoming the dominant world language. So both Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta knew that this was really, we had to start preaching in English to spread it internationally. This is going to be the most effective, efficient way to do that. Time to coincide with the launch of the mission's brand new Calcutta headquarters, the October 1930 Harmonists, not in this issue, but a few years later, when they got a big new headquarters. The October 1930 Harmonists carried the first of a 3-part series by Professor Sanyal about, quote, the Gaudiya Mat. That was the Gaudiya mission, or the Gaudiya Mat. They were kind of synonymous. That was the name of the mission. It was in this article that the founder Acharya phrase, seeded for centuries, finally fructified. So it's in this October 1930 issue of the Harmonist that the phrase actually appears, this English Sanskrit compound phrase. Quote, and here's how it appears in this article. Quote, the Gaudiya Mat is also identical with its, and here it is, founder Acharya. The associates, followers, and abode of his divine grace. Now this is the scholarly disciple, Professor Sanyal, writing about his spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, who's not only an initiating spiritual master, but he happens to be a founder Acharya of the Gaudiya Mat. This is still part of the quote. The associates, followers, and abode of his divine grace are limbs of himself. None of them claim to be anything but a fully subordinate limb of this single individual. He's the head. We're like all his parts. This unconditional, causeless, spontaneous submission to the head is found to be not only compatible with, but absolutely necessary for the fullest freedom of initiative of the subordinate limbs. This is kind of a fancy way of saying that when all the limbs, just as when all the limbs of the body cooperate to feed the stomach, then they're nourished. So when we all cooperate to serve the mission of our spiritual master, then that's our complete, then we're fulfilling our real potential. not when we act whimsically or independently, but when we're obedient to his will. During the Gaudiya mission's finest hour, the first Vaishnava preaching expedition to Europe in the 1930s, that was its finest hour that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta actually took the mission outside India for the first time. The book Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's leading preachers took with them was Sri Krishna Chaitanya, written by Professor Sanyal and edited by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. The work was written with sufficient breadth, depth, and excellence to impress the intelligentsia of the West. So Bhaktisiddhanta knew, if I'm going to send these preachers west, they're going to have to take with them something impressive. And one of the goals was to kind of out-intellectualize the Western intellectuals, because they were very proud of their intellectual acumen. So it was very high English prose written. In its front matter, the elaborate table of contents highlighted the intimate connection between the Adi Gurus, that's the primeval preceptors of the four Vaishnava Sampradayas. Who are they? Brahma, Shiva, Lakshmi, and Brahma, and four Kumars, right? Yes, Chatusana. So in this book, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, just the table of contents highlighted the intimate connection between the Adi Gurus, that is to say, the primeval preceptors of the four Vaishnava Sampradayas, and the Sampradayas four founder acharyas, the Adi Gurus' extraordinarily empowered representatives, who revitalized their disciplic successions within recorded history. So let's see how this looks. Next slide. Yeah, there they are. And there's Lord Shiva. He's a prehistorical figure. And then in the Kali Yuga, in our age, Vishnu Swami revitalized that sampradaya. Chatusana, four Kumaras, Nimbarka revitalized the Kumara sampradaya. Lakshmi or Sri Ramanuja, he revitalized or became the most prominent. And Brahma Madhva, he became the most prominent of the four Vaishnava Sampradaya. These aren't Gaudiya. This is all Vaishnava. But Gaudiya is a special intimate branch or an extension of the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya. So we'll get into that a little bit here. Yeah, Brahma Madhva.
Yeah, Madhvacharya.
Madhvacharya, right.
Okay. I'm just curious, where does Shankaracharya come?
Historically, yeah, he was before these Vaishnava Sampradayas.
Lord Shiva.
Yeah,
Tradition.
right. He was an incarnation of Lord Shiva. He appeared in the 8th century, 700s, and he was predicted in, I think, in Shiva Purana, that Shiva says, I will come in a Kali Yuga disguised as a Brahmin, and my mission is to reestablish the Vedas, because Buddhism had kicked out the Vedas, right?
Yeah.
Because Buddha said, because they were misusing the Vedas, all these Brahmins. So Buddha came and he said, look, forget the Vedas, just follow me. It was a trick. He was an incarnation of God himself. But God, think of the time, was preaching godlessness. In other words, he was saying, forget God, forget scripture, just follow me. Just to become a little less sinful, because they were butchering animals. Nindasi jagga vidhe shuti jatam. Jayadev Goswami had that famous song. Buddha Sharira was the line there. So yeah, Shankara, he got people back into the Vedas, but in an impersonal way, in a voidistic way. So the Vaishnavas came after him to soundly defeat Shankara and get everybody back into a personal conception of the absolute. But we'll get to that a little more. Whoop.
Why like they are like Madhvacharya is the form?
In the Gaudiya Sampradaya? Well, he's not prominent. I mean, he came before, but when Lord Chaitanya came, like did you ever go to Udupi? Okay, that's the seat of the Madhvas. I used to live a couple hours from Udupi, and off and on we would visit, this is back in the 90s, we'd get enlivened because if you go to Sri Krishna Mutt, the Krishna deity is there. It's kind of like the Vrindavan of South India, but it was the Madhvas, they can relate to Bal Krishna, or they can relate to Krishna and Arjuna, but they can't relate to Krishna in the higher rasas of, say, conjugal ras. They can't relate to that Krishna. But Madhva was a great, you see his image outside the temple in bas relief. And what's he doing here? What's this? It's two. There's Ishwar and Jiva. He was preaching Shuddha Dvaita, pure dualism. Ramanuja was Vishishta Dvaita, qualified non-dualism. He was saying that, yes, we're one with the absolute. This is what Ramanuja was saying. We're one with the absolute in quality, but different in quantity. But Madhva was really on the warpath. He just wanted to kick out any hint or notion that there was any, we were equal to the Lord in any way. So he was like this, and he just, he was on a crusade to kick, yeah, it was very radical to kick out any impersonalism. So he appeared, it was 1138 to 1217. He something like that. It was he lived 70 years, and he's considered to be an incarnation, an avatar of Vayu. Yeah.
So that means he kicked out Vedanta.
He kicked out Advaita Vedanta. He kicked out Advaita Vedanta. Just
Non-dualism.
yes. But he kept the real Vedanta, which is the Bhagavat philosophy of the absolute truth being Bhagavan, which is a personality. There's three phases of the truth. There's Brahman, the all-pervading energy of the absolute. Then there's Paramatma, the localized presence in the heart and in every atom. And then there's Bhagavan, who's simultaneously everywhere and in the heart, but he's also somewhere way, beyond this material world. So maybe let me just finish this and we'll go back to those kinds of questions. You have a question. Okay, what can I say?
So my question was that am I right that the upper ones are the historical teachers and the down ones are the co-founder acharyas?
Yeah, actually the upper ones, they're before history, before there's recorded history. In Kali Yuga, we think it's a mark of advancement when we have to write, when reading and writing comes in. Oh, we can read and write. And the people before us, they were primitive, they didn't have reading and writing. But that's not actually the fact. The fact is reading and writing came in when the memory started to diminish and we needed to write things down. People didn't even need writing. You could just hear it and remember it. But Kali Yuga, we have to write things down or we forget everything. So they're the prehistorical teachers, but we go right from here. This is not showing the Shiksha Guru Pratishta, but it goes right to the founder acharyas who lived all within, the last 1,000 years. So it's within historical reference or historical reference.
Mahaprabhu did visit Udupi, right? When he was going to South
I
India.
believe he did go to Udupi.
And then when he heard, they accepted, and he engaged in a debate with
the Tattvavadis.
Yeah, and ultimately they accepted that.
I'd have to go back and look at that from the CC. But we're different than them because especially after, even before Mahaprabhu, Madhavendra Puri and Ishwara Puri and then Mahaprabhu, they were really presenting, conjugal love of Godhead. But if you go to Udupi today, even if there was some temporary conversion there, or they don't talk about that.
I mean, they accepted the philosophy. was a step down, but they were still following.
Oh, yeah, they're still kind of attached to their, it's like even Lord Chaitanya's associate Murari Gupta, right? He, you know, he couldn't give up his attachment to Lord Ram, right? And he confessed this to Mahaprabhu. And he's Murari Gupta, he's a personal associate of Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya smiled, that's okay, you are Hanuman. You can't get the Lord out of your heart, Lord, your Lord Ram out of your heart. So that's okay, because we all have our relationship with the Lord, and whatever relationship the Lord likes us to have is there, and we simply have to uncover it. But especially, you know, following Srila Prabhupada, we're being encouraged to go all the way back to Goloka, Vrindavan, where all the rasas, whether it's neutrality, you know, passive adoration, or servitorship, or friendship, or parental, or conjugal love, they're all tinged with this sweetness of Madhurya. Because all those rasas in Goloka, you know, whether you're a cow or a blade of grass or a peacock or whatever, you're all like in the drama of enhancing Radha and Krishna's Leela, because that's really what's going on. So, but let's just stick. Wait a minute, I can't get back to it. All right.
So,
What can I say?
you feel like talking about all these four tattvas is within the scope of discussion? Just
Well, I'm not really an expert on the four Vaishnava Sampradayas. Some devotees have made it a real definitive study of the Vaishnava Sampradayas. These are not, again, these are Vaishnava Sampradayas. They're not Gaudiya. Yeah, we're a special extension of the Brahma Madhva since Lord Chaitanya's time. But I will tell you that Prabhupada, I did hear a devotee ask Prabhupada about the four Vaishnava Sampradayas. And Prabhupada had an interesting angle on this four Vaishnava Sampradayas. He said, you know, the four Vaishnava Sampradayas, they're kind of like political parties. And he said they all have their platforms based on their founder Acharya's present, you know, what they came to do based on their mission. And, you know, some are preaching different aspects of Vaishnava philosophy. But at the end of the day, we're all Vaishnavas. Just like, you know, Tuesday, there's going to be a midterm election, right? And people are going to vote. And maybe it's not, the analogy doesn't hold so much these days because everybody's so polarized and living in their own little info bubbles, you know. But, you know, people go to the polls and then they vote. And then, you know, in a civilized society, then people accept the results of the election. They don't go on crusades to overturn the elections and all this stuff, you know. So Prabhupada said, so it's like, you know, they present their philosophies, and but we're all Vaishnavas. And so at the end of the election, everybody's Americans. And you might say, okay, it's the Democrats and the Independents and the Republicans, but actually overall we're Americans here. So let's just go on with our business. So Prabhupada said, so we're all Vaishnavas, but we're all accessing different aspects of the Lord's potency, and we have different relationships with him. So, yeah, but according to you know, Kaviraj Goswami and CC, quoting Swarup Damodar, you know, this verse. Anarpita charing chirat karunaya vatirnakalo. This is CC ID 1, 3 or 4. Samarpayatanganato jvalarasam. Svabhakti shriyam harit purita sundara dutikadamba sandipitaha sada hridaya kandare. Spuratu vakshachi nandana. May that Lord, Kaviraj Goswami says, who is known as the son of Srimati Shachi Devi, be transcendentally situated in the innermost chambers of your heart. Resplendent with the radiance of molten gold, he has revealed what no incarnation of God has ever revealed before. And what is that? The most sublime and radiant spiritual knowledge, spiritual mellow of devotional service, the mood of conjugal love. You don't get that in the other sampradayas. Not to disparage them, But when Mahaprabhu comes, he's the avatari, he's the source of all the other avatars. What to speak of, Jiva souls and Lord Shiva, he's his own tattva, or Lakshmi, he's internal potency. But Mahaprabhu himself he's the avatari, he's the source of all the avatars. He's distributing what no one ever revealed. Conjugal love of Radha and Krishna. And he's personally exhibiting that. He's Krishna in the mood of Radha. So it's unparalleled.
Yeah, this the Swaminarayan Sampradaya, they have come from Ramanuja. And then there are many other Vaishnava Sampradaya from Ramanuja. Many who in Telugu, in Telugu, in the Andhra and all that, there are a lot of very prominent ones. And Ramanuja, just like Shankaracharya, and of course Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they also traveled all over India, establishing their mutt and everything. And recently they opened the mutt which has been closed for many hundreds of years in Srinagar, that was established. Re-established that just very recently, like 3-4 years back.
Okay, let's get back to can we get back? Thank you.
Yeah.
You had another, can you hold it for the end? So we're almost there. Okay. Let's see. So the 4 founder acharyas of the Iron Age, there they are on the bottom, profess to preach the views of those original teachers of the, Sanyal says, the religion, the truth coming from God. Sri Krishna Chaitanya strictly applied, quote, founder acharya to the 4 sampradayas, the book, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, not the person. Sri Krishna Chaitanya strictly applied founder acharya to the 4 sampradayas revitalizers. That's what founder acharyas do. They come and they revitalize. They take the sampradaya in a dynamic new direction. Like when Prabhupada came, he well, he did what nobody ever did. He took it all over the world. He cut through so many cultures and mentalities and karmas and religions and ethnic groups, and just amazing how he was endowed with that potency to attract people from all different walks of life. So these 4, otherwise known as sampradaya, they were otherwise known as sampradaya acharyas because they revitalized their sampradayas. Since Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had founded but a branch of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, itself but an extension of the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya, Bhaktisiddhanta knew many would consider him presumptuous if he applied the Sampradaya title to himself. So he didn't call himself a Sampradaya Acharya. And he wasn't, because he didn't start a new Sampradaya, but he did found a dynamic new branch of the Gaudiya Sampradaya called Gaudiya Math. For the written record, however, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did allow Professor Sanyal to confidently refer to him, Bhaktisiddhanta, as the Gaudiya Mission's founder Acharya within the pages of the Harmonist. So he never introduced himself as the founder Acharya of the Gaudiya Math because he knew that people would, that's too close to sounding like Sampradaya Acharya. So he knew the traditionalists would object to that. Who do you think you are? Now, but having said that, go to slide 8. Okay, so in lesson 4 of this series, that's 2 lessons from now, that's Tuesday, we'll see why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta could, with equal confidence later, leave this world and his founder Acharya title behind. He could foresee what would soon befall his own institution. We're going to see that unfortunate history, as well as the one disciple who would be ready, willing, and able to revive it as the founder Acharya of a fresh branch of Lord Chaitanya's mission, far, far away from Mother India. Yeah. Okay, Rasakeli, you had a question. So Prabhus, if you have anything on the chats to reflect or comment or ask, please type it in. And meantime, our Rasakeli Prabhu.
So, no, I was just adding that, like, in the Navadvip Brahman Hatya,
Mm.
from the board of Navadvip, like all the four, like, there's actually customs of like all the four acharyas coming to, Navadvip and having like personal introduction to Lord Gauranga.
Yes, that's a very good point. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, 10 years before he wrote Harinama Chintamani, he wrote a book in Bengali called the Navadvip Mahatmya. And that is Lord, and in that book, I mean, only a liberated soul could write this. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has Lord Nityananda giving, I think it's Jiva Goswami, a guided tour of Navadvip. And in that guided tour, he relates to Jiva that, you know, Sri Jiva, that before these founder acharyas, these of the four sampradayas appeared, Lord Chaitanya appeared to each one of them. And he told them that when he, Mahaprabhu, appeared after them, he's going to use something from each of their philosophies, from Shuddha Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, Dvaita, like that, Dvaita. And then he's going to crown their philosophies with Achintya Beda Beda Tattva, to give the crowning touch to all the philosophies, because as Professor Sanyal writes in his Sri Krishna Chaitanya book, although those other philosophies were correct, they were incomplete until Mahaprabhu came and tied them all up with the Achintya Beda Beda Tattva, that the absolute truth is inconceivably and simultaneously one with, there is a oneness, there is a Advaita, and different. Beta, beta, that's the phrase. Beta, different, and abeta, tattva. So, yeah, that was in Navadvip Dhammahatmya. There was also in Navadvip Dhammahatmya that Lord Nityananda revealed that there would be one day here in this spot in Navadvip, and at Bhuta Mandir, an amazing temple that will be built in this place. And once that temple is built, the whole world will more than ever become aware of Mahaprabhu's glories. As Nityananda, he wants to see Mahaprabhu's glories spread all over the world. And so it's going up. It's going up. And even some people say, oh, that's not the Advaita Mandir. The Advaita Mandir is this and that. And so Ambarish Prabhu, our main organizer and benefactor of the TOBP, says, fine, let them build another one. They can, if they want to build another one somewhere else, they can do it. But this is the one we're building. Yeah. So, okay. How are we doing on time? We're doing all right. So that was from this lesson through lesson 6 in the series. This whole thing it's like a history lesson. It's like a historical journey, but it's not dry. Like you might think history may be in the mundane world. Basically, history in Kali Yuga means history of wars, right? When you had to remember dates, they marked the new conquest. Okay, is there any questions about or comments more about what you heard tonight? The founder Acharya principle. Let's see if we can remember. What was the first seed of the founder Acharya principle? It was organizational seed. And why did we call it that? What was organized?
The 6 gurus, they set up this.
Yeah, they founded the Vishva Vaishnav Raj Sabha, the gathering devotees who worship the king of all devotees, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then after that, we introduced a philosophical seed. And what was the distinction made between what?
The writings of the
No. No, before it was think people, don't think books. No, before that. In Rupa's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there was a distinction made in the book. But do you know what distinction was? It was between the one's personal spiritual master and the great acharyas. We don't have to turn our initiating gurus into supermen or superwomen. You don't have your parents don't have to be Although when we're little kids, we think our parents are Superman and Supermom and Superdad, but we don't have to think like that when we grow up. We can just know that they're bona fide parents, they're good parents, they're legitimate parents, when they allow us to go further and they introduce us to even greater and greater people, but they're always our parents. So we're always very grateful to them. So similarly with our gurus, we don't have to turn them into founder acharyas or, because we're all basically, who did we say we are? We're Prabhupada Anugas. We're all followers of Prabhupada. And remember I said, that's my identity too. Don't make me an endangered species, right? How many people did Prabhupada initiate? 4,780 something, not even 5,000 people. But because he was sending us all over the world, people thought there were zillions of us because we were everywhere, right? But there was only a few of us establishing beachheads, in all the continents like that. And now, as I said, we're the same age as Prabhupada was when he came, or older, and we're gradually following Prabhupada out of this world, more and more. My godbrother Burijan Prabhu, great teacher in ISKCON, he said, Prabhus, now we've entered the decade of tears because so many will be disappearing and it'll be very bittersweet. So, yeah. So every time we hear somebody disappearing, it's a reminder that we're all in the queue. We're all in line. Yeah. So we don't have to worry about, is my guru better than your guru? Or is my guru has got more money than your guru. My guru is more handsome or prettier than your guru. My guru he has more disciples than your guru. This is childish stuff, but it goes on. Right? Because we're all really foundationally followers of Prabhupada. Giriraj Swami wrote that book, Many Moons. And those moons they're moon-like devotees because they're all orbiting around the sun of Srila Prabhupada. And that's supposed to go on for generations, for 10,000 years. Yes. The orbits would get wider as the time goes on. As long as Prabhupada stays the center, then the Sangha will stay intact. It won't just deteriorate into, sectarian cliques. And that's what happened to us in the 80s. I'll share that later in the seminar. And little kingdoms. It was terrible. The movement almost didn't survive. Okay, anything else about the founder Acharya principle?
So like when you narrated these different historical facts, all the different things were happening. So do you feel like it was like Krishna was behind?
Yeah.
Like the way the things happened.
Yes.
The Sahijiyas and all came.
Yeah.
After Mahaprabhu.
Yeah, definitely. That's not. It's when we say that that Lord Chaitanya was sanctioning the whole thing. I mean, it's not that Sahajas and imposters and counterfeit people. It's not that they're part of the internal Leela. No, they're in Maya. But Krishna is working through them to show, don't do this, don't do that. It happened in ISKCON too. We made so many mistakes after Prabhupada left. But that was part of Lord Chaitanya's plan too, that we sort of, forgive the image, we had to vomit up all this, wrong-headed ideas about who we thought the next gurus were. We were turning them into replacements for Prabhupada. It was ridiculous. It was absurd. And the offenses committed hurt a lot of people, especially the gurus and their disciples. So, we have to learn by our mistakes, and so that we can go forward in a more healthy way. Yeah, it's all part of the Lord's plan, but we have to be in the internal energy. Just like when Vidura was thrown out of the kingdom. Remember when Duryodhana threw Vidura out of the palace? So Duryodhana was really in Maya. He was really offending Vidura, a great devotee, the incarnation of Yamaraj. But Vidura, he took it as a blessing because now he could just get out of there Yeah, he'd get out of that terrible association of the Kurus who were always trying to kill the Pandavas and go on pilgrimage. And then come back at the end and save Dhritarashtra after all his sons were dead, including Duryodhana. Yeah. So by the same act, we can either respond to it in the external potency and be in Maya, or we can be in the internal potency and take it as Krishna's mercy. Yeah. So it's very interesting how the Lord's potencies work. Yeah.
Which of the acharyas was the magistrate? Was it
Bhaktivinoda.
Bhaktivinoda?
Yeah, in those days in Puri, the head of the chief law, he was the district.
Yeah.
What's the analogy in America? You know, these federal district judges,
Yeah.
the people who are just below the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
Right? Yeah,
Religious book.
right. So Bhaktivinoda, he was the head judge, the head law person in Puri, and then and he was also in charge of the temple in those days.
And again, also, so it's scholarly and learned person.
Oh yeah, he
That's-
was
that's
so
what-
learned. He wrote 100
Sometimes
books.
we think about them, people, how did people achieve all of that? You know?
Well, he was a special person. He was not an ordinary person. He was. Yes, and how did Prabhupada write scores of books while exploding 108 Hare Krishna entities all over the world? How did he do that?
Yeah, it's amazing.
He was not, he gave up sleeping practically. He just slept a little bit. Only time he could write was when we were all asleep. Because we were so needy and neophyte and we had so many problems. Okay, so he got up, he went to bed at 10 and he got up at 12. He wrote through the night while we were asleep. Yeah, and he slept in the afternoon a little after lunch, So yeah, also not, totally off the bodily platform, writing and traveling and tolerating disease and old age while he did this.
Yeah, we were hearing, Mother Sitala talking about she grew up and she was saying that the Kaviraj said, an ordinary person, he would feel that his body is like on fire.
Yes, it was just skin on bone. There was no, there was no padding. There was no, the Prabhupada just tolerated.
Is there an organizational chart? Is there an organizational chart?
For ISKCON?
Yeah, I mean, starting from,
Krishna?
yeah,
Yeah, there is. I've seen something they used to. In Gita? Oh, the Parampara. No. He means an actual, like if you have a company and you can see the CEO and the directors and there is a chart like this that appeared in the first edition of the fourth canto. I've seen it now. You can probably Google it and find it online. Krishna, how would you write it in?
I'm confused, and I may need to go back and.
Yeah, you have to see, because you can't, it's confusing because you can't show you can't show everything. You can just show the major things because it's just like did I tell the story about it yesterday? I think I touched on a little bit about the tree.
Yeah.
The tree analogy. Yeah. So because did I say how people were writing Prabhupada? And what is this disciplic succession? What is that? Why isn't Arjuna there? Arjuna is the hero of the Bhagavad. He's our hero. How come he's not there? So Prabhupada said, yeah, so Arjuna heard directly from Krishna. And he accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Param Brahma, Param Dham, Pavitram. And then Lord Chaitanya, when he came thousands of years later, he was preaching that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing, but and then Prabhupada gave the analogy, if you have a big, like you have these nice trees around here, big spreading oak tree, for example, and you have many branches, and then you go way over on this side and you take a leaf, and then you go way on the other side, some other branch, and you take a leaf, and then Prabhupada says, and then you taste their characteristics, and the characteristics are the same. So you see it's coming from the same tree. So Krishna, he's the root of the tree, so to speak. So, but to be in the disciplic succession, Prabhupada said, doesn't mean you have to be a particular disciple of a particular guru. It means you accept the disciplic conclusion. So if you accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you're in the disciplic succession, even if you can't map it on a, in one list. Yeah, so, because it's unlimited. But that's interesting remark. It always struck me. To be in the disciplic succession means to accept the disciplic conclusion.
More about understanding.
Yes, yes. Right.
Disciplic succession means know that when you have to accept him first.
You have to accept the bona fide spiritual master, but what he teaches has to be the same as what Krishna teaches. That's all. Krishna and that's everybody refers to the Gita. That's the basic text. So like Prabhupada always quoted, this rascal Radha Krishnan, the first president of India, right? After not prime minister but president. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, right? So he wrote his commentary in the Gita, and he said, famously or infamously, he said, "It is not to the person Krishna we must surrender." Right after Krishna said in 934, "Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskaru mam evaishasi yukvaivam atmanang bhatparayana." There's 5 or 6 times where Krishna uses the personal pronoun me and my. But so Radha Krishna, he starts his commentary by saying, "It is not to the person Krishna." Krishna just said, "Surrender unto me, worship me, offer your obeisances." It is not to the person Krishna to whom we have to surrender. Rather it is the ineffable essence within Krishna and within all of us. In other words, we're all Krishna. He was twisting it to make us all Krishna. So Prabhupada said, just see this rascal, Krishna saying me, my, and Radha Krishna saying something else. So that's not a bona fide spiritual master.
Yeah, well, he was just a scholarly.
He was
person.
Scholarly, but he wasn't bhakta. He was a
Gyani.
Gyani.
He was not a realized person.
He was a Gyani. He wasn't a bhakta.
Yesterday you mentioned the Sam.
Yeah. He was
It's not, you should be scholarly, but mainly you should be bhakti Vedanta.
Yeah.
You have to marry the Vedanta to the bhakti.
He was very arrogant also.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So where does Vivekananda come?
Oh, Vivekananda.
That's another seminar.
Yeah.
Well, Vivekananda, that's another story. Yeah, but I can tell you, I'll give you one punchline from Prabhupada. Because of Vivekananda, all of Bengal has gone to hell. Because he was teaching Yatamat, Tatapat. Whatever you think, Tatapat, that's the path. He wasn't teaching surrender to Krishna. He wasn't teaching Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was also teaching Mayavad.
They're all heavily into as well.
Yes, they're all impersonalists, but they're regarded as great. You can't just go and to this day, if you go to the streets of Calcutta and you say that, because if you say what Prabhupada said, because of Ramakrishna or Vivekananda, all of Bengal has gone to hell. People will start throwing stones at you because they revere these people, right, as great saints, but they don't know. Their attachment is sentimental. They don't have knowledge. It's like fanatic. Religion without philosophy is sentiment and sometimes fanaticism. Philosophy without religion is mental speculation. That's the other side nonsense. You got to marry bhakti to Vedanta. Okay, let's continue over respecting prasad. Or what's going to happen now? You chant again?